Hi, this is Joan Gore, and I am conducting the AIEA Video Archive Project. Archival appears to be a word that people of my generation are now using about ourselves, but the point of our project is to be sure that the people over the last generation of international education professionals and faculty and scholars are recognized for the work that they have done to transform international education from something at the margins of higher education to something that is now part of the mission statements of almost every institution in the country. And I'm very pleased to be talking to Joe Tullbane. And I'm going to ask you, Joe, first just to tell me a little bit about where you are now and what you do now, and then we'll look backwards a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Right now, I've just retired from St Norbert College in De Pere, Wisconsin, a small four-year liberal arts college. I think retirement is somewhat overrated, and after 2 months, I have begun a consultancy firm, which is intent on bringing back some of our senior SIOs who are about to retire or have retired, and use their resources, these phenomenal resources that seem to disappear into the woodwork.
Right.
And that's my intent, and it seems to be progressing.
Well, actually,
so something different.
Right. And typically I had thought of the last question of our conversation being what you might do in the future, but actually it's really good to hear right at the start that you want to build further on what you've done already.
Yeah, I think so. And this is already, it's an interesting effort because it's already taking different roles. It started out as a simple program review concept.
Right.
And now we have, talking about building on the mentorship project of AIEA.
Right.
And allowing the associations to extend themselves without the costs.
Right.
You know, so in essence, we've almost become a not-for-profit in a sense, because our profit's going to be plowed back into the field.
Right.
So yeah, that's
very
new,
exciting.
something different.
Well, tell me a little bit about how long you were at St Norbert and when you began yourself in your own career to be involved in international education.
That's actually an easy question.
Okay.
I started at St Norbert roughly 15 years ago. I started in the international education field roughly 15 years ago. I was hired, I hesitate to say off the street, but that's in concept. I didn't come up as a professor and so on and hired out of the faculty. I actually came from the military diplomatic area of the government, was hired for both my business acumen. I ran a small consulting company then, but consulting
so you know what you're doing
on Russian area studies.
Right.
And so I had a business background, but then I also understood diplomacy and the federal government, etc., which helped. And so I was brought in. They, on paper, had a program, I actually had an international center, a building already, but it had been conceived of as a business operation to meld the local business with Europe and Asia and so on, was intended to make a fair profit for the school, and at the time had become a black hole.
Right.
You know, with money pouring in and never getting back out.
Right.
I will say, never rely on an academic to do a business plan, simply because they're difficult.
Yes.
You know, and these were wildly optimistic business plans.
Right.
You know, to give you an example, a $2 million profit net within a year. You know,
Okay.
I mean, somewhat
that is a little ambitious for anything.
Unrealistic. Ambitious is a better term. But I was asked to bring it under control, and then past that, they didn't really have a vision for international. They had been, it's a Catholic liberal arts school, and the order, the Norbertines, the Catholic order who originally started them, had been missionary. what I might call a soft serve missionary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they weren't like the Jesuits who were out recruiting and
Right.
proselytizing.
Right.
They were out in hospitals and education facilities and so on. But pick a developing part of the world, and that's where they were.
Right.
They were none of the developed world.
Right.
So we had this basic character,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but nobody had explored that,
Mm-hmm.
and so we began to explore it, and we had study abroad, but for a school of 2,000, we were sending 10
Right.
on semester abroad each semester. Well, in the 15 years, the 14 years, we were almost at 200 going abroad.
That's fantastic.
100 each semester.
Right.
And for us, that's phenomenal.
Right.
We graduated a class in May that had 41% of it had been on semester or longer.
That's remarkable,
You know,
actually.
and then another 10% on short term,
Right.
and then almost 10% internationals
Right.
on campus. So,
Right,
so, I
right.
mean,
That's a very
the-
important component of
Yeah,
it.
the unwashed masses were actually the minority masses. They weren't.
That's
they weren't
fantastic.
that said, you know, things go up and down.
Right.
As always. And it's not just study abroad. One of my proudest moments, frankly, is what we call our Alpha to Omega project,
Mm-hmm.
and that's helping shepherd the internationals to creating an environment where they can integrate into the college, and the college community can integrate into them.
Right.
I mean, that's that two-way street that has to be formed, and I think we're doing it. In some cases, trite programs, football 101.
Right.
It's Americana, you know. But for the football coach, running a program like that means that he's helping his fan base.
Right.
It's purely, you know, selfish.
Right.
But what winds up happening, I've visibly seen it. A group of Japanese students are walking down the sidewalk, and a group of football players come past them, and the football players say, "Hey, hi, do you remember us from the practice?"
Yes.
That would have never happened.
Exactly.
You know, we have similar programs with the Greeks, which we consider to be the most insular of our clubs.
Right.
They have now imposed on themselves almost a quota system. I say almost because it's an informal system where they want to have internationals in their Greeks.
Right.
I mean,
That's
unheard of,
fantastic.
you know.
That is
So-
fantastic.
So we've made some progress.
So, you know,
in
considering,
that
as you said, that in most situations, the vast majority of American students are not going to go abroad.
That's correct.
The reality
Well, it's
is,
true.
if we're really talking about global citizenship, whatever
Mhm.
we use that term to mean, we have to figure out what's going on our campuses.
Of course.
And it looks like that was one of the accomplishments of
That was one of
Japan.
our goals. We have partially accomplished it.
Right.
You know, and I think you're right. I think we joke, we say it tongue in cheek, but we talk about study abroad, semester abroad, as a thrice-born operation.
Right.
You're born into your society. You don't understand the society because you have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
You go overseas in something longer than what we call a peanut butter trip.
Mm-hmm.
That is a trip that's short enough that you never have to touch the culture.
Right. Right. Right.
You know, and with something longer than that, a semester, let's say, and you begin to understand, develop an understanding, maybe a faulty understanding, but somewhat of an understanding of why the other countries or country think the way they do about us and
Right.
about our society.
Right.
And then you come back and you're born that third time back into your society, but now you have something to compare it to.
Right.
You know, and frankly, it makes better citizens.
Right.
It's that simple. You know?
Right.
So, yeah.
And you're also doing something for those Japanese students to help them
Without a
understand
doubt.
the global citizenship idea has to go both ways.
Yeah.
Or multiple ways.
And our biggest problem, frankly, with our study abroad program is that to go is an adventure. We have to remind them that they represent the school and they represent the country as well as their family, so that they don't go and, you know, go into the four-letter word, you know, routine and,
Right.
and you know, go to American raves and so on, which are appalling
Yeah.
and give us a bad reputation.
Right.
But if they represent our school properly and their families properly, They
That's an
wind up
interesting approach to
showing,
talk to them about their families as
showing,
well.
that who we really are.
Right.
And we also tell them, understand when they see you, you are America.
Right.
They will ask you questions that you've never imagined you don't know the answer to.
Right.
You need to find the answer out to help them.
Right.
So yeah, there's many things like that I think that help. The students coming back though, our biggest problem is what we might want to call reverse culture shock.
Oh yes.
And to the point of actual clinical depression.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've transformed, but their family, their friends, their siblings, it was just 6 months of their lives.
Right.
Nothing's happened.
And
Something different.
when they return, the typical complaint is somebody says, "How was it?" And we say, "Fine," and that's it. They don't
That's
hear
all they
anymore.
want to hear.
Yeah.
Past that, you're wasting their time.
Right.
So we've now created a whole series of programs where they can express themselves.
Right.
Often to the internationals who are incoming, so the internationals understand what it is to be overseas.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, tell me, one of the things that really interests me is as I go through this interview series,
Yes.
I'm learning how many different backgrounds, in the case of AIEA members, SIOs are from. And certainly some are from the more traditional liberal arts and social sciences. Others are from agriculture, engineering, very different fields. So tell me a little bit about your perspective coming in as both a business person and military, which is one of the driving forces of international education.
Of course it is, yeah. And I'm the poster child for that,
Okay.
that odd
Right.
odd group. I did have my PhD. I've got it. The Army actually helped me get it.
What area did you do it in?
In Russian area studies.
Right.
So I read in economics, in history, and in political science
Right.
for the degree at Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
I worked as in my consultancy and so on. That was my area. And in the Army, in fact, after 6 years with troops, with soldiers, I was recruited to be what they call a regional specialist.
Right.
And it's the Army's, I think it's maybe a little bit much, the title, but they call us the soldier diplomats of the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea, of course, was to work with the embassies. And so I've been in attaché a few times with the military attaché to the ambassadors. I've worked in other capacities in foreign countries. 23-year military career. 6 of it were in schools, being schooled. Probably 10 of it or 11 of it was overseas.
Wow.
And not in war, but it's interesting because of the positions that this specialty holds. We do lose 2 or 3 people a year.
Oh my God.
Simply
Yes.
because we're obvious targets.
Right.
That said, it gives you a sort of a life view. It's important to do what you're doing and do it well and do
Right.
it now. I came out of that, was recruited by St Norbert after a stint as a contract consultant to the Pentagon. I was one of their senior Russian political analysts. I came to St Norbert in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
They again hired me for a business acumen, background overseas, etc. I speak Spanish because I grew up in Spain,
Right.
4th grade through high school, and hence I went back to Spain as the military attaché at some
Right.
place in the future. Having my 2 sons actually graduate from the same high school I did,
Oh,
which
that's
is somewhat
great.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's an aside, but an interesting aside,
Right.
I think. I brought something different than what a faculty member would bring. Now when I did kind of write the contract that I signed, when I promoted the contract, one of the things I said to the president at the time was, if I come, it's because we mesh.
Right.
I don't need the job. We need
Right.
to mesh. And I said, and I need to teach.
Yes.
And he said, I don't know that that you'll have time to do that because we're trying to fix this. And I said, I will fix the operation. That's not the issue. but I have to teach because I have to touch the kids.
Right, to understand
to be-
the vibrancy
I
of
have
what
to
you're
be-
doing.
Yeah, I have to see and feel that.
Yeah.
And he acceded to that. And so I actually have taught in poli-sci, Russian politics, the European Union, and then the European Community. I've taught leadership. We have a leadership studies program. I've taught in that.
That's wonderful.
So it's bringing different things to the
Right.
field. But I was a faculty member. I mean, I was accepted as a
Right.
faculty member. Actually, I was elected as a faculty member by the faculty.
That's
Which is also
really
unique.
very supportive, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it meant they cared.
Right, and it meant that what you brought to the table, you were also able to articulate in a way that they appreciated, and that does not always happen.
You hope. I mean, I hoped I had, and I
Right.
think I did. I always couched the whole internationalization on campus as a faculty-driven process.
Right,
You know.
right,
Uh,
right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
So
that was
it's a slightly different.
Right, and it is education, and it is faculty-driven, and it is also true in the way that offices of international education have developed in the U.S. They are small businesses.
Of course they are.
They are being charged with ensuring that they're covering their own costs,
Expenses.
and in some cases being a revenue generator in certain areas.
Well, and my title was the director of the center, but the umbrella title was the associate dean of the college
Right,
for international and outreach.
right,
And the outreach undertook such things as high school programs and so on.
right,
But they were related.
right,
We run a multiple speaker series, and those speakers all have international bends. I mean, we're in the middle of America. It's
Right.
Green Bay, They say it's the upper Midwest. I think it's just the North.
right,
Because it's
right.
simply too cold.
It's
to be
also
the upper
cold, I
Midwest,
know.
But that said, we bring in speakers from Washington and from Europe, and we bring in, presidents and chancellors and so
Right.
on of countries
Right.
to talk at our school. The students need that.
Right,
Lech Walesa came and spoke.
wow.
And I chewed out my leadership students the next day because I saw none of them in the crowd.
And here was one of the most important leaders of the post-communist era.
A keynote. I mean, you could argue that he has as much to do with the fall of the wall
Right.
as anybody.
Right,
And, I said, you've missed a chance to see history.
Right.
And you don't understand that.
Right.
You need to.
right,
And so we're chipping away at the wall.
right. Could I ask something I should have asked at the
Yeah,
beginning? That
please.
is, how did you find Green Bay, Wisconsin? And how did they find you?
I had an open contract, an open-ended contract with the military.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, I think I could have probably, I have friends that are still there today, still doing the same job. My wife would say I bore easily.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you can write the white papers, as they call them, in your sleep,
Right.
what's the point?
Right.
So I began a process of, with my PhD and so on, I thought, okay, I've retired from the military. I don't need a lot of money. It's not an
Right.
hand. So why not teach? I love teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I applied to a number of institutions, starting in Texas, which is where I'm from,
Mm-hmm.
but broadening eventually to the world.
Right.
And virtually didn't get a nibble.
Because you're not the classic background.
That's right. And I finally found a president of an unnamed university who was kind enough to write me, or actually phone me, on Thanksgiving Day to tell me I didn't get the job. But he was kind of saying, you were my candidate.
Wow.
And he said, and I said, well, can I, the usual questions, can I improve my resume? What can I have done wrong? And he said, your resume is sterling. There's nothing you can do. And I said, well, then you're telling me I'm simply dead in the water. And I need not to look at academia as as an issue, as a possibility. He said, no, I'm telling you, you applied for the wrong job.
Perfect. Oh my
And
gosh.
he said, we need people like you at a university as a dean,
Right.
at a small college as an associate dean,
Right.
and we need you, and you will get the job. In the spring of '99, I applied to 4 places, got 4 interviews and 2 offers.
Wow, so
And
that
one of
was
those
great.
offers was Green Bay. And I remember phoning my spouse at home in the evening when she was off her job and saying, I don't know which to take. And she said, when you talked about the first place, which was on the East Coast, a Middle Atlantic university, you said, I can do this job. I can do this job with my hands tied behind my back. It's not an issue. When you talked about St. Norbert, you were so excited. She said, I couldn't shut you up. You were just one idea after another bubbling
Right.
up of what you could do to turn this around.
Right.
And that's why we went to Green Bay. Also, we had lived in Washington on and off for 23 years.
Right.
And she said, I do not want to live in that kind of, in that environment, that
Northern
hectic,
Virginia,
frenetic environment.
Right.
In Green Bay, when I got there, I remember there was an article in the paper about gridlock.
Right.
They had timed their evening rush hour, and it had expanded from 6 minutes to 9 minutes. And all I could do was
We're doing
laugh.
this interview in Washington, D.C.
Yes,
where
we are
it takes
indeed.
forever to get anywhere.
So Green Bay, they're good people. They became my home.
Oh, that's great. Are you still there? Are you staying?
We are there. We are now spending a bit more time in the South, in Florida, during the winter. In fact, I'm up here from Florida.
Right.
We were trying 3 months out this time. I suspect it'll be eventually 4 or 5 months there and 6 or 7 months in Green
Right.
Bay. Green Bay is a spectacular weather in the fall, spring,
right.
and summer. But it's the winter.
It's the
that's
winters,
difficult.
yeah.
We are. One of the problems with being a nomad, which is what I have been,
Right.
both an international nomad and a domestic nomad, is that you don't live places very long.
Right.
And so Green Bay with 15 years is the longest we've ever lived
That's
in my
fantastic.
life anywhere.
Right. That's amazing. And that means
So those
that
are my
you were
friends.
rooted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the first time.
For the first time,
That's
ever.
fantastic.
You talk to people and they say, oh, yeah, we go to Thanksgiving with our grandparents and, they're 10 doors down the road.
Right. Right.
My kids saw their grandparents probably once every 5 years.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying.
And both boys would have told me, they did tell me, when they were in 6th grade and 4th grade, yeah, I was here back for a school in Northern Virginia, in fact, in the Tidewater area. And they said, individually, Dad, this is a wonderful country that you have. When are we going back home to Europe?
Oh, isn't that interesting? That's how they felt.
They looked at it.
Right.
My younger son could never figure out what the difference between a town, a city, a village, and a county were.
Right.
It just didn't mean anything to it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's actually a wonderful way to be able to raise children, although it has costs.
It has costs. They speak German, they speak Spanish,
Right.
they speak English, and, it has its costs.
Right. Well, let me ask you as a final question, the one we started talking about, and that is your future contributions. What would you like your consulting company to be able to do, and where do you see international education going?
The sad thing about international education is that its importance is at the college university level.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean in the sense of the overall entity, I mean at the level as opposed to a department or a discipline or,
Right.
or any. And so the departments and the disciplines in the academic end and in the co-curricular end tend to look at us as a peripheral piece. I think what we need to, and this sounds like a very, very low aspiration, I think what we need to aspire to is what the librarians have. They are faculty.
Right?
They don't have PhDs, they're professionals.
Mm-hmm.
They're valued as professionals.
Right.
And they know that the school can't function without a library.
Right.
Frankly, the school cannot function without international education.
Right.
But they don't know that.
Right. Right.
So where do I see us going? I see us professionalizing. I see us eventually having PhD programs, a fair number of them, that speak to international education management and administration. I'm afraid that may make us too homogeneous. I think there's a value in bringing people like me from the outside in.
I agree.
And what will my firm do? Well, first of all, I've found that typically international programs don't review themselves. They don't even do a self-review.
That's really interesting.
And they don't do the most basic thing. One of the things we're grappling with right now in our firm is how do we define campus internationalization?
Right.
Because until we can define it ourselves, we have no business, no matter how much experience we have no business out there,
right,
trying to, what is the gospel if you don't know the gospel?
Right, right.
So I look at it as more than just a consultancy. I look at it as something that could help the associations without becoming an association. I don't want that. I think we need to value our sages, our sages and our crones. We need to value them. We need to understand that they can work less. They can be part of this less often and still offer value.
Right.
And somehow that's what I want to get to.
Right.
Before I get too old to do it.
Right. Well, I think that's very exciting, and I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
It'll be interesting to hear the next time you retire.
If ever. I mean, this would be the third retirement.
Yes. Yeah, you're going strong.
Finished, so this will be the fourth.
Well, if you decide to, let me know. We'll do another interview.
That sounds good. That sounds wonderful.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.